All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Redefining Society, which today include a nice trip outside of the walls, as we say in Italy. There are all the walls in the town, so when you go outside during the weekend, you go outside of the walls. Here we go outside of the atmosphere, I guess. We go all the way up. We're gonna go in space, and to do that, we got Tim Fowler, which Sean and I, which he joined me on this episode.
I
He couldn't
crashed
resist
this
a
party.
trip to space.
I
Right?
couldn't resist.
Like, oh, you're going to space? I'm coming.
I'm up early for this one.
Very good. And Tim, which actually joined us on one of our event coverage not too long ago, and it was about cybersecurity in space. So today we're not going to touch much on cybersecurity, although I'm sure it's will be inevitable in certain moments. But we're going to talk about why are we going to space and how are we actually living in our society with a lot of stuff that we brought back from space. I'm not talking about lunar stones or anything like that or meteorites. I'm talking about stuff that we use every day. So Tim knows a lot about it. We were chatting after the conversation last time, and I said, dude, come back and let's chat. So Sean, thank you for joining us, first of all.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah. Well, we'll see if I kick you out or I kick
I know.
you.
I don't know how much I'll get to say, but I'm going to enjoy listening anyway.
Oh, you got a lot to say. I know you like space too. And Tim, welcome back.
Thank you guys for having me back. I enjoyed it last time, but I'm actually really excited to talk about kind of society and space today, because these are some of the deep questions. Like, even when I talk about cybersecurity and space, the questions like why. Why does it matter to me, and things like that? And so I'm really excited to have a chance to kind of pull that apart today and look at some of the interesting aspects of our modern society and how it's a space-based society.
Yeah. And let's start from the planet Earth, though, and in particular, a couple of words about you. We mentioned cybersecurity already, but we can give an idea of why you are in this field or in this space. I'm doing the quote.
Yeah, the puns are free today.
So yeah, a little bit about you, and everybody knows Sean, so we don't need to introduce him.
Yeah, so by trade, I'm an offensive security analyst for Black Hills Information Security, specializing in all forms of offensive security testing, primarily penetration testing, red team, things like that. It's pretty much been my entire career, as learning how to break things strategically, find vulnerabilities and weaknesses so that organizations can better secure themselves against the inevitable threats that are out there. But over the last year or so, I've really kind of been taking that skill set and that focus and looking at the application of space systems, and because I kind of look at that as like it's the next frontier, if you will, from a security perspective, where we really need to be focusing on, because we're having more and more dependency on space systems, and just the values and the benefits that existing in space culture provides us as citizens of Earth, not just now, but also looking to the future. And so that's really where predominantly I've been researching, like I said, for over the last year. And it's been quite an adventure and a deep dive. I've learned a lot. I've gotten scared a few times about like, wow, this is just a little more simplistic than it actually should be, and stuff. But yeah, again, thank you guys for having me and giving me this opportunity to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. This is most of our conversation are, like I was talking yesterday with Dr. Joseph. Is another cybersecurity guy, and he has a Cyber Cafe podcast. And I said, that's the way I like it. It's like we're sitting on a cafe somewhere, and it just happened that we record the conversation, right?
It's the best ones.
So this is what it is. So, Sean, anything in your mind? You wanna get the first stub with some why questions?
Are you letting me lead?
Yeah, go for it. I already talked enough.
Well, the thing that strikes me is there's a lot of general media coverage on things like AI, and certainly when the cloud, smartphones and the cloud, so a lot of technologies. I guess my point is, get a lot of consumer and then therefore a lot of media attention. Yet you kind of mentioned this in the lead-in that there's a lot of space technology that maybe doesn't get a lot of exposure, yet it's deeply ingrained into a lot of things that we do and use as other technologies.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is it because it's secret, or is it because it just so integrated that we don't really notice it, or what's your thoughts?
Yes, it's kind of an interesting question. It's because and to really answer it, we have to kind of go back to some of the beginning of specifically like in the U.S. and our space heritage and things like that. You know, we sought to explore space and put a man on the moon in the 60s, and it was kind of out of this necessity in the Cold War space race that we had with the Russians, and we were basically getting beat and stuff like that. And so we had this kind of government nation kind of uprising to support this, that we wanted to go to space, we wanted to do this, we wanted to put a man on the moon and stuff like that. And that happened, and everybody was excited and stuff, but it just slowly the interest just kind of started fading from a public perspective. You know, there's lots of media coverage when I cover it, and just we essentially society, we kind of became desensitized to all the amazing things that were happening in space. And then you'd have events that would happen that would, you know, kind of spike that interest again, and then we'd go back down. You know, there's not I mean, if you ask, you know, your average person that's been around, that was born in, let's say, the 60s or 70s, like, what exciting happened in U.S. space from 1969 to 1986? And like, nobody really has an answer. Once you get to 1986, it's like, Challenger, we remember that, you know, the tragedy that was and stuff. And then we see this kind of, you know, we go back down, and it's up. The Hubble Space Telescope brings out something new for us. And so as society, we've just kind of pushed space. You know, it's just not, it's out there. Like, it's this abstract concept that it doesn't really impact our lives, or we don't think about it. We think of it purely from like a scientific research. Some people may look at it as just billions of dollars wasted on research and stuff. But when we actually look at our modern lives, as we talked about just a little bit ago, that so much of what happened in space has come down and kind of just intertwined itself. And I think, you know, like we were talking about, like if you sleep on a smart or a memory foam mattress, like that's a space material that was developed with NASA. If you happen to have Tang with your morning breakfast, you know, that's a famous one. But even things down to our communication system stuff, but even like the fruits and the vegetables that you may consume on a daily basis, most of those modern ones are going to be impacted in some way by space, because we're using the technology in space to be able to monitor our agricultural outputs and stuff, looking for trends within in soils and environments and stuff, to make sure that we're able to get the highest yields possible. And I mean, like, I love farmers, because they're like, most people think of them as like really just simple people, but a lot of the modern farmers, they have the most technological setups. They've got like, you know, auto navigation tractors using GPS and stuff to make sure that they're getting you know, hitting the same spots all the time, and using all of this data that is actually produced from our space systems to be able to maximize the efficiency and the yields that they're getting. And so, you know, obviously communications is a big one. You know, GPS is like, how does anybody get anywhere? How people use paper maps is just dumbfounding to a lot of people and stuff. We've become just really, really, really reliant on the technologies that are in space, but we don't actually think about where they come from. We don't think about how, like, what they're actually doing. And we also don't think about the ramifications in our lives if those aren't there anymore. It's just, you know, it's kind of like you go flip a power switch and you just expect the light bulb to come on. And it's not till it doesn't come on, you go, oh, there's something wrong.
Mm. And real quick, Marco, because I had a chat with a gentleman, Philip Miller, who happens to be a farmer, and he's also Chief Information Security Officer in the tech world. But he and I had a conversation about what you just described, the tractors, automation, using data from space, using GPS from space, using soil analysis and other data from space to really help him build the farm of the future that can really dial in the best produce with the best rates and understanding, and that's just his farm, but understanding the co-ops and then the larger supply chain and delivery and all that stuff. A lot of it's driven by space, and it was a fascinating conversation.
Yeah, there's a YouTube channel that I watch. It's a young man in Iowa, and he's helping, it's corn and soybean farm and stuff like that. So, and I just looking at all like how they're utilizing all of these technology systems and things like that. Like they're just doing it because it makes them the most efficient as possible and stuff. And it's like all of these little gains that we're making in society are possible because we took the risk. We went to space. We tried a bunch of stuff. We failed at a bunch of stuff, but we learned at the same time about things that work and how to make them work and be resilient in that kind of environment. And then now we're getting to reap the benefits, in some cases 30 years later, from that continuously.
Yeah, and I mean, we can bring it to the philosophical aspect of why we go to space. I mean, you can just mention the famous deliver speech from JFK when he said, why do we go to Mount Everest? Because it was there, and because it's part of who we are, exploring and making things. I mean, this desire to go there, and you can compare going to space with what it was going to go around the world with wooden boats and sailing and risking their life and taking chances, and that's how we grow as a society.
Yeah, it's I do believe that we have this innate human characteristic we are naturally explorers, and we want to push the boundaries, and we want to not to provoke the flat earthers, but we want to look over the edge and see what's beyond the horizon. And that's important, because if you look at the history of mankind, that's how we have advanced technologically, is pushing the boundaries, trying new things, not being afraid to fail, because you're going to fail. A lot of times, there's one of my favorite guilty pleasure movies is Nicolas Cage and National Treasure, and there's a line in there that's like, Thomas Edison took him 2,000 times to learn how to make the incandescent light bulb, and stuff. And I don't know if that number's actually true, but it's stuck with me. It's like these things take a long time. They stuck. But yeah, from a just an innate human characteristics, like we want to be able to explain the unknown. We want to be able to understand it. We want to be able to reach out. In this case, we're talking about to the cosmos, and see, what is out there, because, there are people that don't believe that we're alone, within the solar system or within the universe and stuff. There's others that are like, hey, we don't know, but it's like, why don't we go find out? Like, let's what do we have to do to figure this out? And, there's plans to colonize Mars, and which is controversial, and especially when you look back at what some of the issues that we are dealing with here on Earth. It's like, why focus over there and stuff? But it's like it's going to take these intrepid explorers to go and push these boundaries for us to be able to really understand what we're fully capable of as humans. And it's just, we've seen this time and time again through history, and space and interplanetary stuff. Those are just kind of the next iteration for us.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, Tim, this may be an odd question, but I don't know if there are any examples that I can think of even to kind of highlight what I'm trying to get at. Is there a point that it's too far, too much, too soon? I'm just wondering, do we pierce something that we can't put back together?
do we inadvertently create a black hole by turning on the Large Hadron Collider at CERN? No, yeah. So, theoretically, yes. But I think in practicality, no. I say no with one exception. It depends on what you're prepared to lose. Because we could push the boundaries, and we could load a rocket up and we could send somebody to Mars today. That would be too soon, because we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have the understanding and stuff like that. You're always going to have individuals that are going to want to kind of flirt with this limit of too soon and stuff like that. And they're, if we do cross over that boundary, yeah, they're going to be in most cases negative repercussions and stuff. But I think for the most part, we operate in a way that we still have this sense of caution. Like, we need to make sure that we're doing things safely. And once we get up to that cusp, it's like, okay, now we've got to make these informed decisions and stuff. Sometimes you have to unclip your rope and just jump. That's the only way you're going to move forward and stuff. And there comes risk with that. But I don't really kind of see this kind of us going over the edge just because out of ignorance, and go like, oh, what we shouldn't have done that too late. You could argue from a historical standpoint, the Manhattan Project would probably be kind of the close approximation of what we're talking about. Is like, should we have even done that once that Pandora's box was opened? That's it. Society fundamentally changed, not for the good, not for better or for worse. Like, it just changed. And so that's, things that we're going to have to look at as a future, because it's not just the technological side and stuff like that. We have to look at it from the emotional side, from the well-being side of, like, how are people going to be able to digest this, understand this, to be able to process what's happening or what's going to happen, and how it's going to impact their lives. We got to look at things very holistically. But I really don't. I see people like Elon Musk. It was the person that would come, like, he's going to push the boundaries. But there's no track record that he's going to push the boundaries to a point where we're going to be like, yeah, we've gone too far. It's still it is a rapid acceleration, but it's still got this, safety net or this caution to it. And it's like, hey, we are taking all these things into consideration, maybe not pleasing everybody in the process of doing it, but like, that's, when we talk about advancements in human abilities and capability, that's kind of the history that we're looking at, is where it's people just going, just pushing the envelope, maybe a little faster than everybody else would like. But at the end of the day, like, okay, it's safe. You guys can come. You can come join us now.
So this makes me think too. Like, there's three things, maybe more. So there is the economic factor, because it costs a lot of money. Like, when you blow a test Saturn or an X or space, it costs money. It's like, all right, it exploded, but hey, it was a success. A lot of people are gonna be like, what the hell? Like, that blew up. But it was success because maybe you got that little farther up, right? So there is that. Then there is the technology, right? We may have the money, but we may not have the technology. I don't know. I can think about going to find America again. We may have the money from the King of Portugal and Queen, but we had a better boat that would have been easier, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the political will. So let's put these three together. What do you think is holding us more right now from making that faster step?
So if you look at the history of space, I will tell you, we are moving faster than we ever have. And that is thanks to organizations like SpaceX and Blue Origin and United Launch Alliance, and a lot of these commercial, non-government entities, at least here within the United States. And so that's one thing that's kind of helped is the democratization of space, making it accessible to more people. and so that these players can, I mean, space. I got to see a Falcon 9 launch at the Cape just a week or so ago, and like they're launching all the time, like at a cadence and that NASA never would have conceived. And so we are actually moving really, really fast. But then you look at something like the Artemis missions, which is NASA's plan to return people to the moon, and we're getting delays and we're getting setbacks and stuff like that because that one is moving significantly slower. But there's one fundamental key difference between what the majority of what SpaceX is doing and what Artemis is doing. Is, in fact, we're trying to send people back to the moon, not just to touch the soil, but to actually stay there. And stuff. And so when you add that human life element to it, everything changes. Now, SpaceX has the Dragon Crew capsule, and they've, I think, 10 or so missions to the International Space Station now, which has just been incredible. But it is like, if you look at those kind of two different things, it's like, how can we have SpaceX that's sending people to the International Space Station on a and then NASA's like dragging their feet and stuff like that.
It's a different height of space, right? One it's in that orbit, and the other one is escape gravity.
But here's the thing: we put people on the moon in the 60s.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is, like, the Apollo engineers, they actually wrote the book. Here is how to send people to the moon, and you can actually go and download it. It's a document, and I can't remember the actual publication number and stuff. But it's like here's everything you have to do. And with Artemis, we're like, yep, we're going to throw that out. We're just not going to reference that. We're going to do it. And there's pros and cons to that. Part of it is because so much about Artemis has just been completely untested. It's new technologies, it's new processes and things like that. And that's it's like, if we could do it the old way and we're going to get these results, but we're not necessarily pushing the envelope. And so we have to, that's the kind of balance that we have to do of like, hey, how much can we push without actually holding us back from being able to accomplish our mission and stuff like that. And NASA's an interesting one because it's it's a government it's a publicly funded organization, and so they have a lot of requirements. There's a lot of moving pieces. I have a ton of respect for everybody that's involved in these missions and works at NASA and stuff, but it's just a historically slow moving process when you have everything's getting bid out and everything's going through just a standard kind of military industrial complex, if you will, whereas or SpaceX and Blue Origins are like, yeah, we're just doing it ourselves. Like they're just throwing money at the problem, and they're going like, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do this faster than anybody else, and the results of kind of this failing fast kind of mentality, that's what's actually getting us the significant advances that we're seeing in space.
I'm wondering, Tim, so when I picture this new frontier, I see a few key players, and looking at the U.S. primarily, and the government's leveraging a lot of these commercial players that are in my mind for this. And I don't know if we have things we can look at in the past, but the view that I have is a small number of really wealthy people are going to have the most control over this new world that Earth will become tremendously reliant upon. We're already there. We talked about the farming, right? If there's a level of control there, rather than a distributed control by society. I don't know if we'll get there, and we just need to have this high level of investment.
Yeah, so that's a concern, for sure. The best example that I can think of, and this is one that actually I'm super excited for and super terrified for at the same time. So if we look at it from our cellular communications here in the United States, there's only about 3 primary telco providers that they've monopolized the entire cell phone market and stuff. And Elon and SpaceX has looked at it and go, nah, we're not okay with this. So they just recently launched their first batch of direct-to-cell satellites which will be providing direct cell phone communications, data, voice, stuff like that, essentially to your iPhone or to your Android phone and stuff, without the need of having the terrestrial cell phone infrastructure and stuff. And so now you're going to have cell phone coverage anywhere that you have coverage in the sky. That's awesome from a technological standpoint and stuff, but you now have SpaceX and Starlink is the primary internet provider in space. Amazon's Project Kuiper is coming to compete with that and stuff, but they're not there yet. Like, there's something about being first to market that's going to be advantage. And then you're going to add in the capability of direct to cell, which could take out, really hit the the telcos and stuff like that monopoly and stuff. And it's controlled by one company, one individual. And so that is definitely something that is a concern. The nice thing is that, with the rules and regulation of space and the international collaborations, like, you can't own space, you can't do things. So there's nothing stopping somebody else from going up and competing, except for money, time, resources, stuff. Like, you're really going to have to just duplicate and replicate what someone like Elon and Starlink has done, or what Amazon's doing with Project Kuiper, and there's other ones out there. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that, as from a society standpoint, as we continue to be more and more reliant on this, and it's like, once these switches start getting flipped, like, it's now we're up a whole new level, and it's completely transparent to us. We do become much more beholden to those the powerful in that space, pun intended. And that's definitely a concern that I have, and it's a double-edged sword, because from a technology side, I'm like, yes, this is awesome, but from a societal side, and just what peace of mind side, it's like, man, I don't like having these digital overlords. I mean, we already have them. We have Google, we have Amazon, we have, whatever, Facebook, Meta. And so we're already kind of subject to that. But it is a little bit different.
And I'm quickly, Marco, this idea of first to market, lots of Falcon 9 launches, satellites for this, satellites for that, Starlinks here and there. Is there enough space in space? This might be a silly question, but I don't know. I'm picturing this slice that's just being filled with big things, medium-sized things, micro things.
So there, the answer is yes, but we still have to be careful, because we are dealing with we're already starting to see, like, just more and more stuff, especially in low Earth orbit, which is predominantly where things are going to be, that are service providing to us as users. We're going to see a bunch of things continue to populate that area in space. Now, what the thing that I think is going to happen is, what we're really going to start to see is we're going to see a bunch of population growth in low Earth orbit, and then as systems become outdated, as their orbits decay and stuff like that, we're going to just see kind of replacements go up, higher power, more capability and stuff. And so I think what you're actually going to see is, you're going to see this, like, big population boom, and then we're going to stabilize, and then hopefully we'll actually be able to decrease the population density in terms of satellites and stuff like that as technology increases. Because what we've gone from is this monolithic, like, 100, 200 ton satellites and stuff, to these little, like, CubeSat things that are just, can fit in the size of your hand and stuff like that. And so it's like, hey, we can put 100 of those up instead of one of those, from a cost perspective, and have much more resiliency and stuff. I do expect we'll kind of see a trend going not back to monolithic, but more kind of happy medium. It's like, hey, we can do we can function with less. And so we don't necessarily need as much, but it's definitely a concern, especially from a space debris perspective. which is a legitimate concern. And there's some fantastic organizations that are trying to help solve this problem because, what happens when a piece of sand flying at 22,000 miles an hour hits your satellite? It's now a bunch of little satellites is what it becomes. And then, there's this thing, concern, the Kessler syndrome, where it's basically, if you want to think out of like a nuclear chain reaction, where you go and split an atom, protons come off, those protons that will hit additional atoms, and you have this chain reaction. The same concern is that with space debris is if you can generate a single large enough instance of space debris that is able to permeate out, and then it's just going to cascade and keep destroying more and more objects in space. And so we're having to kind of manage that. We're having to figure out plans to account for that. So like if I launch something today, even like a CubeSat, I'm going to make sure I have a 10-year deorbit plan to make sure that we can get it into the atmosphere, get it to burn up, so that it's not, causing a problem for other people. But these are some of the challenges that we have to work for. There's entire companies that are, their entire mission and stuff is being able to like de-escalate potential collisions and impacts between various spacecraft and to prevent that orbital debris and stuff. So like we're breeding new companies and new requirements. It's like, hey, it's like this wasn't a concern 20 years ago, but now it's like, hey, we got like 7,000 satellites up there right now. Like they're all, we probably, we're actually generating just entire like jobs that just didn't exist 20 years ago as a result of our being in space.
But it's also because we don't simply learn from the past. Right? I mean, hey, there is 3 cars. Who gives a shit in the streets? Then they become billions, and now we have cities. And I mean, is it always like, let's just, whatever, we got room?
Well, I mean, the answer is always just throw more at it.
Exactly.
Just more. Everything.
But then we have to regulate. Then there is a problem.
And like I said, like looking at the this is kind of the pros and cons of space, where we go like used to have these monolithic satellite, and we still do geostationary satellites and stuff. They're huge, they're massive, just as you would expect. But it's like when we started figuring out, it's like, hey, we could split that mission up 100 times,
right? And
then our drives our cost way down, like significantly way down, especially when you're talking about you're paying by the kilogram, which if on a SpaceX mission, I think it starts at about $300,000 a kilogram. And so it's like, okay, well, if I've got a 100 kilogram satellite, or I have 100 kilograms worth of satellites, okay, that's the same cost. But, if that monolithic has a failure, I now have to send another $100,000 or 100 kilogram satellite back up to replace it. Whereas with the smaller stuff, we'll just send another. I mean, that's what's happening with Starlink. That's a perfect example. Every Falcon 9 launch is 21, 22, 23 Starlink satellites. They can literally they could just fall out of the sky. And Starlink's, well, that's unfortunate. We'll just launch another batch because they've been able to drive that cost down and stuff. And that's kind of been the answer. It's like it solves a lot of technological problems. But at the same time, now we have space highways that are getting heavily congested with traffic, and it's like, hey, maybe we should just like have like a train or a bus that can have a bunch, and which means you're getting almost back into the monolithic side of things.
So you went there, and I want to take, and I know we're gonna go over 35, whatever, minutes. So I want to talk about a little bit about the moon, and it's kind of like connect with the technology that you're talking about. Like, like people have hypothesized, a station going around, and then it's from the planet, and from there you go to the moon, then from the moon you go to Mars, and then you go in stages. Because let's face it, I mean, despite the advancement of the technology, you still need a shitload of power and gas and whatever you use to get out of the atmosphere. That's the cost by the kilogram, right? So Now we're talking about going back to the moon. Okay, once you get out of the gravity and you enter into the moon gravity, we've seen Apollo 8, go around, and they've gone around and stuff. But then we got to build stuff over there, right? We got to Thankfully, we get 3 printers and we find water. We have water on the moon. But I mean,
you need a McDonald's and a Starbucks. And
my point is, we don't have this
glad you're
little.
going here.
Okay, go. Because I'm going from the small little thing that you're talking about, the Starlink, to like, okay, we're talking about sending people,
society. Like how do we have an actual space, a society in space?
Yeah.
And so you hit on the fundamental piece of it, and it's the mass. Like how do we get enough mass into orbit so that we can actually start to build things and stuff? And what my hands down, my favorite author, Daniel Suarez, he's written 2 books. He's written a bunch of books, and I highly recommend all of them. Start at the very beginning with Freedom, but his most 2 recent one, the first one's called Delta V, and the second one's called Critical Mass. And I don't want to spoil those for any of your listeners, but if you are interested in space and where I truly believe the future is going, read these 2 books, because it is centered around Delta V is centered around actually asteroid mining, which is something that we are actively looking at doing. We've recovered regolith from asteroids already as society, and critical mass continues on that. And you're doing lunar mining of regolith, and to be able to produce these fundamental building blocks of alloys and different things like that. Because what's going to happen? The problem is, like, we can't launch all this stuff up from there. It's just too cost prohibitive. But if we can go to, let's say, the moon and figure out how to refine the regolith, pull out all the elements and stuff, and start making space steel and stuff like that. It's like, we don't make stuff out of steel hardly for aerospace because it's so heavy. But once it's in orbit or outside the atmosphere, it doesn't really matter how heavy it is, other than acceleration purposes and stuff. And so this is one of the things, like, for me, us going back to the moon with Artemis is so incredibly important, because it is going to take us being able to establish some kind of off-world resources, because it's not cost prohibitive for us to be able to launch that much mass in a reasonable amount of time, at a reasonable amount of money, for us to do anything. And then it's like, oh, we're having to account for all these failure rates and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I wouldn't go read those books. They're fantastic. I don't want to spoil them for you. But they hit on this exact subject. And I think he's done a tremendous amount of research. But I would say he's like 90% to what the future is. Now, how long it takes us to get there, I don't know, and stuff. But when you look at what all these space agencies around the world are working on, in terms of like taking the steps for us to being able to do this, once we're able to get and establish off-world resources, that's it. That's the key. And so the reason that the second book is called Critical Mass is, once you establish that critical mass in situ, now you're the king. Whoever is able to do that first is going to be able to define how we move forward in the future.
It's like that tipping point.
It's very much a tipping point.
Crossing the chasm.
Yeah. I mean, we're gonna say and in the book, there's an entire off-world economic system that is backed by the intrinsic value of those resources. And so, it's a complicated thing, and stuff, but I like I said, I encourage you to read it and stuff. But, like, at the end of the day, having resources in space, that is, like, if you want to win the space race 2.0, that's how you do it. Because you're not gonna be able to lift it off of Earth. I mean, you can do as much as you can, but the goal would be to launch as much as you can, so that you can harvest, refine, and manufacture the other stuff that you need.
Yeah. I think we should finish this conversation, which, of course, could be never ending, because we can talk about so many things. Like, now that we went from what we have on the planet that come from the first, NASA mission, Mercury, Apollo, Gemini, and all of that, and and then we talked about what's going on around. Now then we went to the moon because like we use a, a trajectory that went there, and now you can talk about recreating, society over there. We had conversations, Sean and I, with people who talk about medicine in space, right? Like if you go to Mars, how then are you going to, somebody feels sick, like, oh yeah, it's 7 months, we're going to send you something. Like you're going to have to do it now, right? And then regulation, and then we talk about law in space. And I mean, so there is an entire recreating an entire social contract on how society can work in space, which I would love to have this conversation.
Yeah, and it's something that I'm actually, kind of like looking into because so much of the cybersecurity stuff that I've been dealing with, and ultimately the part of the way we solve those problems is through the regulatory, through the policies, through the international agreements, is going like, here's how we have to do this, and stuff. And it's definitely something I'm interested in, because especially when you consider, like, based off of international agreements and stuff, like, nobody can own space. It's like, I can't like just, stick we stuck a flag on the moon, we win the original space race, but we don't own it. And so having that international collaboration and cooperation is going to be absolutely pivotal to the success. And then, what happens when we hit the space wars? And I'm not talking like necessarily Star Wars and stuff, but where you have, billionaire companies or trillionaire companies or nation states and stuff competing for the same resources and stuff. It's like, territorial disputes, even though you can't own it, like you kind of set a claim and like, hey, here's our boundaries that we're operating and stuff, and then some rogue nation sends a bunch of telepresence robots to commandeer your manufacturing on the moon. Like it gets into a really, really interesting kind of sci-fi concept initially, but then when you actually start to think about it, going like, man, we're not far off. like the future's now.
It's wild. Bob, I was just thinking, will I see that in my lifetime? Will my daughter, will my grandson? I don't know. How far will it be?
I hope I get to see part of it.
Well, you know what we get to see is that we get to talk about the stuff not in the sci-fi realm anymore. We're talking about the stuff that we may see, we may not see, but we have either seen it happen because we were there. I was just born when 1969 on the moon, but I've looked many times the videos and the documentary, and now we're having this conversation that, let's face it, a few decades ago would have been sci-fi. So in a way, we're not living in this realm of, like, as you said, it's sci-fi. It's like, it's what we're talking about is plausible. Yeah.
And it's like, oh, we don't have the technology that is. No, we just haven't perfected the technology. It's not reliable enough, or it's not cost effective enough and stuff. But like everything that we're talking about, like we've been laying the groundwork for this for decades, and like it's coming. It's like what is our sci-fi? Like what is our generation sci-fi? Because if you look, go back to the original Star Trek and stuff like that, and that it's like, okay, the what is it, the tricorder? We all carry cell phones in our pockets today. Like, I mean, that's just our life and stuff. And so like, what is my son's, like, what's going to be his science fiction, and how is that going to become reality for him? It's definitely something that's interesting. And
I think it's going to be going back to, organic farming and living on the land.
Yes.
Who knows?
I would not be opposed to that. I mean, I'd be out of a job.
It's kind of like a wave, and who knows? Maybe in a better way, but I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna kill this conversation. I don't want to.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's technology, it's security, it's society, it's philosophy, it's everything we geek we geek on, and we have fun. So again, Tim, I thank you for this, and again, whenever you wanna geek out with us about this kind of stuff.
Shoot,
Just tell me, hey, I got an hour. Let's make more coffee. Let's make more coffee.
Just order it and stuff. No, guys, thank you so much. I'm gonna drop in about 4 minutes. Got to go actually do the job that pays. But no, this is the stuff that's I love this so much because as we hit at the end of it, it's not like we're now forecasting for when, not if, this stuff will ever happen and things. And so, but yeah, thank you guys for having me back on.
Yeah.
This is one of those things that's like, this year in space, what has happened over the last year that's actually kind of changing, what we're doing and stuff. I think the direct to sell thing is one it's going to change so much. Because we are, it won't be long before you're not going to have Verizon, you're not going to have, AT&T or whatever. It's like you're going to be using Starlink Cellular or whatever they're going to call it or whatever, and it's going to be incredibly reliable, and we're going to be so dependent on it, and it's just another, chink where it's like, hey, we own you, we own your communications. And so that's definitely
which is always somebody's goal, is to make.
So
as we are talking, I'm gonna say goodbye because I haven't killed the recording yet. So we're still going. So by now we're fading out the conversation, what we usually do. So this is a little bit of behind the scene of what we normally do. We keep the conversation going, but this time we're actually still recording so quickly. This was Redefining Society. Tim Fowler was with us. Sean joined it. And I see, again, this conversation happening soon. And you guys stay tuned, share, and we're going to keep chatting for a little bit longer, but I'm going to kill the broadcast. So thank you, Tim. Thank you, Sean.
Peace out.
Thank you, everyone.